Chapter 19. Preparations for handling father. I always maintain that it is by a chap's behaviour on this sort of occasion that you can really weigh him in the balance and judge if he's got the right chivalrous delicacy in him or not. It's the acid test. Come to me and say to me, "Wooster, you know me pretty well. Tell me something. To settle a bet, would you consider that I was a preux chevalier, as the expression is?" And I reply, "My dear Bates, or Cuthbertson, or whatever their name may be, I shall be able to answer that question better if you will indicate what you would do if you happened to be in a room where two loving hearts, after a painful misunderstanding, were in the process of getting together again on a basis of chumminess and mutual esteem. Would you duck behind the desk? Or would you stand there and drink the performance in with bulging eyes? My own views are rigid. When a lover's reconciliation is in progress, I do not remain goggling. As far as the conditions will permit, I withdraw and leave them to it. But though with the desk between us I couldn't see these two, I could hear them, and most unpleasant it was. I've known Chuffy, as I say, practically from childhood, and in the course of the years I've seen him in a variety of differing circumstances and in many moods. And I never would have believed him capable of the revolting slush which now proceeded from his lips at the rate of about 250 words to the minute. When I tell you that the observation, "There, little girl," was the only one I can bring myself to quote, you'll be able to gather something of the ordeal to which I was subjected, and to make matters worse, on an empty stomach, mind you. Pauline, meanwhile, was contributing little or nothing to the dialogue. Until this moment I'd considered that in the matter of emotional reaction to my appearance, the scullery maid had set a mark at which others who met me suddenly might shoot in vain. But Pauline eclipsed her completely. She remained in Chuffy's arms gurgling like a leaky radiator, and it was only quite some little time later that she began to regain anything of a grip on her faculties. The girl seemed goofy. I suppose the fact of the matter was that at the moment when I manifested myself she was undergoing a considerable mental strain, and that my appearance served, as it were, to put the tin hat on it. At any rate, she continued to give this radiator impersonation of hers so long that in the end it seemed to strike Chuffy that it was about time he switched off the murmured endearments and got down to first causes. "But, darling," I heard him say, "what was it, Angel? What scared you, sweetheart? Tell me, precious. Did you see something, pet?" It seemed to me that the moment had come to join the meeting. I rose above the top of the desk, and Pauline shied like a frightened horse. It annoyed me, I confess. Bertram Wooster is not accustomed to causing convulsions in the gentler sex. As a matter of fact, usually when girls see me, they incline rather to the amused smile, or on occasion to the weary sigh and the despairing, "Oh, are you here again, Bertie?" But better even that than this stark horror. "Hello, Chuffy," I said. "Nice day." You might have thought that relief would have been the emotion uppermost in Pauline Stoker's bosom on discovering that the cause of her panic was merely an old friend. But no, she absolutely glared at me. "You poor goof," she cried. "What's the big idea, playing hide-and-go-seek like that and scaring people stiff? And I don't know if you know it, but you've got smut in your face." Nor was Chuffy behindhand in the recriminations. "Bertie," he said in a sort of moaning way, "my God, I might have guessed it would be you. You really are, without exception, the most completely drivelling lunatic that was ever at large." I felt it was time to check this sort of thing pretty sharply. "I regret," I said with a cold hauteur, "that I startled this young fathead, but my motives in concealing myself behind that desk were based on prudence and sound reasoning. And talking of lunatics, Chuffnell, don't forget that I was compelled to overhear what you've been saying for the last 5 minutes." I was pleased to see the blush of shame mantle his cheek. He shuffled uncomfortably. "You oughtn't to have listened. You don't imagine that I wanted to listen, do you?" Something of defiance or bravado came into his manner. "And why the devil shouldn't I talk like that? I love her, blast you, and I don't care who knows it." "Oh, quite," I said, with a scarcely veiled contempt. "She's the most marvellous thing on earth." "No, you are, darling," said Pauline. "No, you are, Angel," said Chuffy. "No, you are, Sweetness. No, you are, Precious." "Please," I said, "please." Chuffy gave me a nasty look. "You were saying, Wooster?" "Oh, nothing. I thought you made a remark." "Oh, no." "Good. You'd better not." The first nausea had worn off somewhat by this time, and it was a kindlier Bertram Wooster who now displayed himself. I'm a broad-minded man, and I reflected charitably that it was wrong to be hard on a fellow in Chuffy's situation. After all, in special circumstances, he could scarcely be expected to preserve the decencies. I struck a conciliatory note. "Chuffy, old man," I said, "we mustn't allow ourselves to brawl. This is a moment for the genial eye and the affable smile. No one could be more delighted than myself that you and this old friend of mine have buried the dead past and started all square again together. I may look on myself as an old friend, may I not?" She beamed in a cordial manner. "Well, I should hope so, you poor ditherer. Why, I knew you before I even met Marmaduke." I turned to Chuffy. "This Marmaduke business, I want to take that up with you sometime. Fancy you keeping that dark all these years." "There's nothing wrong in being christened Marmaduke, is there?" said Chuffy a little heatedly. "Oh, nothing wrong, no, but we shall all have a good laugh about it at the drones." "Bertie," said Chuffy tensely, "if you breathe a word of it to those blighters at the drones, I'll track you to the ends of the earth and strangle you with my bare hands." Well, we must see. But as I was saying, I'm delighted that this reconciliation has taken place, being, as I am, one of Pauline's closest friends. We had some pretty good times together in the old days, didn't we? You bet. That day at Piping Rock? Ah. And do you remember the night the car broke down and we were stranded for hours somewhere in the wilds of Westchester County in the rain? I should say so. Your feet got wet, and I very wisely took your stockings off. "Here," said Chuffy. "Oh, it's all right, old man. I conducted myself throughout with the nicest propriety. All I'm trying to establish is that I'm an old friend of Pauline's, and am consequently entitled to rejoice at the present situation. There are few more charming girls than this P. Stoker, and you're lucky to have won her, old man, in spite of the fact that she's handicapped by possessing a father who bears a striking resemblance to something out of the Book of Revelations. Oh, father's a good enough egg if you rub him the right way. You hear that, Chuffy? In rubbing this bally old thug, be sure you do it the right way." "He is not a bally old thug." Pardon me, I appeal to Chuffy." Chuffy scratched his chin, somewhat embarrassed. "I must say, Angel, he does strike me at times as a bit above the odds." "Exactly," I said. "And never forget that he's resolved that Pauline shall marry me." "Didn't you know that?" "Oh, yes." Pauline was wearing a sort of Joan of Arc look. "I'm darned if I'll marry you, Bertie." "The right spirit," I said approvingly. "But can you preserve that intrepid attitude when you see Pop breathing flame through his nostrils and chewing broken bottles in the foreground? Will you not, if I may coin a phrase, be afraid of the big bad wolf?" She wavered a bit. "We're going to have a pretty tough time with him, of course. I can see that. He's pretty sore with you, Angel, you know." Chuffy puffed out his chest. "I'll attend to him." "No," I said firmly, "I will attend to him. Leave the whole conduct of the affair to me." Pauline laughed. I didn't like it. It seemed to me to have a derogatory ring. "You? Why, you poor lamb, you would run a mile if father so much as said boo to you." I raised the eyebrows. "I anticipate no such contingency. Why should he say boo to me? I mean, a damn silly thing for anybody to say to anyone. And even if he did make that idiotic observation, the effects would not be such as you have outlined. That I was once a little on the nervous side in your parents' presence, I admit, but no longer, not any more. The scales have fallen from my eyes. Recently I've seen him in the space of something under 3 minutes reduced by Jeeves from a howling blizzard to a gentle breeze, and his spell is broken. When he comes, you may leave him to me with every confidence. I shall not be rough with him, but I shall be very firm." Chuffy looked a bit thoughtful. "Is he coming?" Outside in the garden, footsteps had become audible, also heavy breathing. I jerked a thumb at the window. "This, if I mistake not, Watson," I said, "is our client now." Chapter 20. Jeeves Has News. And so it was. A substantial form appeared against the summer sky. It entered, it took a seat, and having taken a seat, it hauled out a handkerchief and started to mop the brow. A bit preoccupied, I divined, and my trained sense enabled me to recognize the symptoms. They were those of a man who'd just been hobnobbing with Brinkley. That this diagnosis was correct was proved a moment later when, lowering the handkerchief for a space, he disclosed what had all the makings of a very sweetish black eye. Pauline, sighting this, uttered a daughterly yip. "What on earth has been happening, Father?" Old Stoker breathed heavily. "I couldn't get at the fellow," he said with a sort of wild regret in his voice. "What fellow?" "I don't know who he was, some lunatic in that dower house. He stood there at the window throwing potatoes at me. I'd hardly knocked at the door when he was there at the window, throwing potatoes. Wouldn't come out like a man and let me get at him, just stood at the window, throwing potatoes." I confess that as I heard these words, a sort of reluctant admiration for this bloke Brinkley stole over me. We could never be friends, of course, but one had to admit that he was a man who could do the right and public-spirited thing when the occasion called. I took it that old Stoker's banging on the knocker had roused him from a morning-after reverie to the discovery that he had a pretty nasty headache, and that he'd instantly started to take steps through the proper channels, all most satisfactory. "You can consider yourself dashed lucky," I said, pointing out the bright side, "that the fellow elected to deal with you at long range. For close-quarters work he usually employs a carving knife or a chopper, and a good deal of clever footwork is called for." He'd been so wrapped up in his own concerns till now that I don't think he'd got on to the fact that Bertram was with him once more. At any rate, he stared quite a bit. "Ah, Stoker," I said airily, to help him out. He continued to goggle. "Are you Wooster?" he asked in what seemed to me a rather awed way. "Still Wooster, Stoker, old man," I said cheerily. "First, last, and all the time, Bertram Wooster." He was looking from Chuffy to Pauline and back again, almost pleadingly, as if seeking comfort and support. "What the devil has he done to his face?" "A sunburn," I said. "Well, Stoker," I proceeded, anxious to get the main business of the day settled, "it's most convenient that you should have dropped in like this. I've been looking for you. Well, that's putting it a bit loosely, perhaps, but anyway, I'm glad to see you now, because I've been wanting to tell you that that idea of yours about your daughter and me getting married is off. Forget it, Stoker. Abandon it. Wash it right out. Nothing to it at all." It would be difficult to overpraise the magnificent courage and firmness with which I spoke. In fact, for a moment I rather wondered if I mightn't have overdone it a little, because I caught Pauline's eye, and there was such a look of worshipping reverence in it that it seemed quite on the cards that, overcome by my glamour at this juncture, she might decide that I was her hero after all, and switch back again from Chuffy to me. This thought caused me to go on a bit quickly to the next item on the agenda. "She's going to marry Chuffy, Lord Chuffnor. Him," I said, indicating C with a wave of the hand. "What?" "Yes, all set." Old Stoker gave a powerful snort. He was deeply moved. "Is this true?" "Yes, Father." "Oh, you intend to marry a man who calls your father a pop-eyed old swindler, do you?" I was intrigued. "Did you call him a pop-eyed old swindler, Chuffy?" Chuffy hitched up a lower jaw, which had sagged a bit. "Certainly not," he said weakly. "You did," said Stoker, "when I told you I wasn't going to buy this house of yours." "Oh, well," said Chuffy, "you know how it is." Pauline intervened. She seemed to be feeling that the point was being wandered from. Women like to stick to the practical issue. "Anyway, I'm going to marry him, Father." "You are not." "I am too. I love him." "And only yesterday you were in love with this damned sooty-faced imbecile here." I drew myself up. "We Woosters can make allowances for a father's chagrin, but there is a sharply defined limit." "Stoker," I said, "you forget yourself strangely. I must ask you to preserve the decencies of debate, and it isn't soot, it's boot polish." "I wasn't," cried Pauline. "You said you were." "Well, I wasn't." Old Stoker got off another of his snorts. "The fact of the matter is you don't know your own mind, and I'm going to make it up for you." "I'm not going to marry Bertie, whatever you say." "Well, you're certainly not going to marry a fortune-hunting English lord." Chuffy took this fairly big. "What do you mean? A fortune-hunting English lord. I mean what I say. You haven't a cent and you're trying to marry a girl in Pauline's position. Why, darn it, you're just like that fellow in that musical comedy I saw once. What was the name? Lord Watley. An animal cry escaped Chuffy's ashen lips. What, Watley? The living spit of him. Same sort of face, same expression, same way of talking. I've been wondering all along who it was you reminded me of, and now I know. Lord Watley. Pauline charged in again. You're talking perfect nonsense, Father. The whole trouble all along was that Marmaduke was so scrupulous and chivalrous that he wouldn't ask me to marry him till he felt he had enough money. I couldn't think what was the matter with him. And then you promised to buy Chuffnell Hall, and 5 minutes later he came bounding up to me and started proposing. If you didn't mean to buy the Hall, you ought not to have said you would, and I don't see why you won't either. I was planning to buy it because Glossop asked me to, said old Stoker. The way I feel towards that guy now, I wouldn't buy a peanut stand to please him. I felt impelled to put in a word. Not a bad sort, old Glossop. I like him. You can have him. What first endeared him to me was the way he set about little Seabury last night. It seemed to me to argue the right outlook. Stoker was staring with his left eye. The other had now closed like some tired flower at nightfall. I couldn't help feeling that Brinkley must have been a jolly good shot to have plugged him so squarely. It's not the easiest thing in the world to hit a fellow in the eye with a potato at a longish range. I know, because I've tried it. The very nature of the potato, it being a rummy shape and covered with knobs, renders accurate aiming a tricky business. What's that you're saying? Glossop soaked that boy? With a will, they tell me. Well, I'm darned. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those films where the tough guy hears the old song his mother used to teach him at her knee, and you get a close-up of his face working, and before you know where you are, he's a melted man and off doing lots of good to all and sundry. A bit sudden, I've always looked on it as, but you can take it from me that these lightning softenings do occur. Because now, before our very eyes, old Stoker was undergoing one of them. One moment he'd been absolutely the man of chilled steel, the next he was practically human. He stared at me, speechless, and then he licked his lips. You really tell me old Glossop did that? I wasn't present in person, but I have it straight from Jeeves, who got it from Mary the parlourmaid, who was an eyewitness throughout. He put it across little Seabury properly, at a venture, I should say, with the back of a hairbrush. Well, I'm darned. Pauline was doing a bit of eye-sparkling. You could see that hope had dawned once more. I'm not sure she didn't clap her hands in girlish glee. You see, Father, you got him all wrong. He's really a splendid man. You'll have to go to him and tell him you're sorry you were so snooty and that you're going to buy the house for him after all. Well, I could have told the poor clothhead that she was doing the wrong thing, butting in like this. Girls have no idea of handling any situation that calls for nice tact. I mean to say, Jeeves will tell you that on these occasions the whole thing is to study the psychology of the individual, and an owl could have seen what old Stoker's psychology was like. A male owl, that is. He was one of those fellows who get their backs up the minute they think their nearest and dearest are trying to shove them into anything. A chap who, as the Bible puts it, if you say go, he cometh, and if you say come, he goeth. A fellow, in a word, who, if he came to the door with push on it, would always pull. And I was right. Left to himself, this Stoker, in about another half-minute, would have been dancing round the room, strewing roses out of his hat. He was within a short jump of becoming a thing compact entirely of sweetness and light. Now he suddenly stiffened, and a mulish look came into his eye. You could see his haughty spirit resented being rushed. I won't do anything of the sort. Oh, Father, telling me what I'm to do and what I'm not to do. I didn't mean it like that. Never mind how you meant it. Affairs had taken an unpleasant turn. Old Stoker was gruffling to himself like a not-too-sunny bulldog. Pauline was looking as if she'd recently taken a short-arm punch in the solar plexus. Chuffy had the air of a man who hasn't yet recovered from being compared to Lord Watley. And as for me, while I could see that it was a moment that called for the intervention of a silver-tongued orator, I felt it wasn't much use having a pop at being a silver-tongued orator if one hadn't anything to say. and I hadn't. So, all that occurred was a good deal of silence, and this silence was still in progress and getting momentarily stickier when there was a knock at the door, and in floated Jeeves. "Excuse me, sir," he said, shimmering towards old Stoker and presenting an envelope on a salver. "A seaman from your yacht has just brought this cablegram, which arrived shortly after your departure this morning. The captain of the vessel, fancying that it might be of an urgent nature, instructed him to convey it to this house. I took it from him at the back door, and hastened hither with it in order to deliver it to you personally." The way he put it made the whole thing seem like one of those great epics you read about. You followed the procedure step by step, and the interest and drama worked up to the big moment. Old Stoker, however, instead of being thrilled, seemed somewhat on the impatient side. "What you mean is there's a cable for me?" "Yes, sir." "Then why not say so, damn it, instead of making a song about it? Do you think you're singing an opera or something? Gimme!" Jeeves handed over the missive with a dignified reserve and drifted out with the salver. Stoker started to rip open the envelope. "I shall certainly not say anything of the kind to Glossop," he said, resuming the discussion. "If he cares to come to me and apologize, I may possibly—" His voice died away with a sort of sound not unlike the last utterance of one of those toy ducks you inflate and then let the air out of. His jaw had dropped, and he was staring at the cable as if he'd suddenly discovered he was fondling a tarantula. The next moment there proceeded from his lips an observation which even in these lax modern days I should certainly not have considered suitable for mixed company. Pauline hopped towards him, solicitous, when pain and anguish racks the brow stuff. "What's the matter, father?" Old Stoker was making gulping noises. "It's happened." "What's happened?" What? I saw Chuffy start. What? I'll tell you what. They're contesting old George's will." "You don't mean that?" "I do mean that. Read it for yourself." Pauline studied the document. She looked up, rattled. "But if this goes through, bang goes your 50 million. "Of course it does." "We shan't have a cent, hardly." Chuffy came to life with a jerk. "Say that again. Do you mean you've lost all your money?" "It looks like it." "Fine," said Chuffy. "Great. Ripping. Wonderful. Topping splendid." Pauline gave a sort of jump. "Why, so it is, isn't it?" "Of course it is. I'm broke. You're broke. Let's rush off and get married." "Of course." "This makes everything all right. Nobody can say I'm like Watley now." "They certainly can't." Watley, on hearing the news, would have edged out." "I should say so. You wouldn't have been able to see him for dust." "It's marvellous. It's magnificent. In all my life I've never heard of such a bit of luck as this." "Nor have I." "Coming just at the right time." "Exactly at the right time." "It's topping." "It's simply great." Their fresh young enthusiasm seemed to affect old Stoker like a boil on the cheekbone. "Stop talking that infernal rot and listen to me. Haven't you any sense at all? What do you mean, you've lost your money? Do you think I'm going to lie down and let this go through without making any comeback? They haven't a dog's chance. Old George was as sane as I am, and I've got Sir Roderick Glossop, the greatest alienist in England, to prove it." "But you haven't." "I've only to put Glossop on the witness stand and their case collapses like a bubble." "But Sir Roderick won't testify for you now you've quarrelled with him." Old Stoker sizzled a bit, or fumed, if you care to put it that way. "Who says I've quarrelled with him? Show me the half-wit who dares to assert that I'm not on the most cordial terms with Sir Roderick Glossop. Just because we had a trifling temporary difference, such as happens to the closest of friends, does that mean that we're not like brothers?" "But suppose he won't apologize to you?" "There has never been any question of his apologizing to me. I shall naturally apologize to him. I suppose I'm man enough to admit it frankly when I realize that I've been in the wrong and have wounded my best friend's feelings, aren't I? Of course I shall apologize to him, and he will accept my apology in the spirit in which it's given. There's nothing small about Sir Roderick Glossop. I'll have him over in New York testifying his head off inside 2 weeks. What's the name of that place he's staying at? Seaview Hotel, isn't it? I'll get him on the wire at once and arrange a meeting." I had to put in a word here. He's not at the hotel. I know, because Jeeves was trying to get him just now and drew a blank.
Then where is he?
I couldn't say.
He must be somewhere.
Ah, I said, following the reasoning and finding it sound. So he is, no doubt, but where? Quite possibly he's in London by now.
Why London?
Why not?
Was he planning to go to London?
He may have been.
What's his address in London?
I don't know.
Doesn't any of you know?
I don't, said Pauline. I don't, said Chuffy.
A lot of use you are to a man, said old Stoker severely. Get out, we're busy.
The remark was addressed to Jeeves, who'd come floating in again. It's one of this man's most remarkable properties, that now you see him and now you don't. Or rather, now you don't see him and now you do. You're talking of this and that, and you suddenly sense a presence, so to speak, and there he is.
I beg your pardon, sir, said Jeeves.
I was desirous of speaking to his lordship for a moment. Chuffy waved a hand, distraught. Later on, Jeeves.
Very good, my lord.
We're a little busy just now.
Just so, my lord. Well, it's not going to be so hard to locate a man of Sir Roderick's eminence, said old Stoker, resuming. His address will be in Who's Who. Have you got a Who's Who?
No, said Chuffy. Old Stoker flung the hand skyward.
Good God!
Jeeves coughed. If you'll pardon me for intruding the observation, sir, I think I can tell you where Sir Roderick is. If I'm right in supposing that it is Sir Roderick Glossop that you're anxious to find.
Of course it is. How many Sir Rodericks do you think I know? Where is he, then?
In the garden, sir.
This garden, do you mean?
Yes, sir.
Then go and ask him to come here at once. Say that Mr. Stoker wishes to see him immediately on a matter of the utmost importance. No, stop. Don't you go. I'll go myself. Whereabouts in the garden did you see him?
I didn't see him, sir. I was merely informed that he was there.
Old Stoker clicked the tongue a bit. Well, damn it, whereabouts in the garden did whoever merely informed you that he was in the garden merely inform you that he was?
In the potting shed, sir.
The potting shed?
Yes, sir.
What's he doing in the potting shed?
Sitting, sir, I imagine. As I say, I do not speak from first-hand observation. My informant is Constable Dobson.
Huh? What? Constable Dobson? Who's he?
The police officer who arrested Sir Roderick last night, sir.
He bowed slightly from the hips and left the room.
Chapter 21. Jeeves Finds the Way.
Jeeves! Bellowed Chuffy.
Jeeves! Screamed Pauline.
Jeeves!
I shouted.
Hey!
Yelled old Stoker. The door had closed, and I'll swear it hadn't opened again. Nevertheless, there was the man in our midst once more, an expression of courteous inquiry on his face.
Jeeves!
Cried Chuffy. My lord?
Jeeves!
Shrieked Pauline.
Miss?
Jeeves? I vociferated. Sir?
Hey, you!
Boomed old Stoker. Whether Jeeves liked being called "Hey, you," I couldn't say. His well-moulded face betrayed no resentment. "Sir?" he said.
"What do you mean by going off like that?"
I was under the impression that his lordship, occupied with more vital matters, was not at leisure to attend to the communication I desired to make, sir. I plan to return later, sir.
Well, stay put for a second, won't you?
Certainly, sir. Had I been aware that you were desirous of speaking to me, sir, I wouldn't have withdrawn from the room. It was merely the apprehension lest I might be intruding at a moment when my presence was not desired.
All right, all right, all right.
I noted, not for the first time, that there was something about Jeeves's conversational methods that seemed to jar upon old Stoker.
Never mind all that.
Your presence is of the essence, Jeeves, I said. Thank you, sir. Chuffy took the floor, Stoker being occupied for the nonce with making a noise like a wounded buffalo. Jeeves? My lord, did you say that Sir Roderick Glossop had been arrested? Yes, my lord. It was on that point that I wished to speak to your lordship. I came to inform you that Sir Roderick had been apprehended by Constable Dobson last night and placed in the potting shed in the hall grounds, the constable remaining on guard at the door. The larger potting shed, my lord, not the smaller one. The potting shed to which I allude is the potting shed on the right as you enter the kitchen garden. It has a red-tiled roof, in contradistinction to the smaller potting shed, the roof of which is constructed of...
I'd never been, as you might say, frightfully fond of J. Washburn-Stoker, but it seemed only neighbourly at this moment to try to save him from apoplexy. Jeeves, I said. Sir. Never mind which potting shed? No, sir. Not of the essence. I quite understand, sir. Then carry on, Jeeves. He cast a glance of respectful commiseration at old Stoker, who seemed to be having a good deal of trouble with his bronchial tubes. It appears, my lord, that Constable Dobson arrested Sir Roderick at an advanced hour last night. He was then in something of a quandary as to what means to take for his disposal. You must understand, my lord, that in the conflagration which destroyed Mr. Wooster's cottage, that of Sergeant Vowles, which is contiguous, was also burned down. And as this cottage of Sergeant Vowles's is also the local police station, Constable Dobson was not unnaturally somewhat at a loss to know where to place his prisoner, and the more so as Sergeant Vowles was not there to advise him, he, in fighting the flames, having sustained an unfortunate injury to his head, and having been removed to the house of his aunt. I refer to his Aunt Maud, who resides in Chuffnell Regis, not... I did the square thing again. Never mind which Aunt, Jeeves. No, sir. Scarcely germane. Quite so, sir. Then carry on, Jeeves. Very good, sir. So in the end, acting upon his own initiative, the constable arrived at the conclusion that as secure a place as any would be the potting shed. The larger potting shed. We understand, Jeeves, the one with the tiled roof. Precisely, sir. He, therefore, placed Sir Roderick in the larger potting shed, and remained on guard there throughout the remainder of the night. Some little time ago the gardener came on duty, and the constable, summoning one of them, a young fellow named... All right, Jeeves. Very good, sir. Summoning this young fellow, he dispatched him to the temporary residence of Sergeant Vowles, in the hope that the latter would now be sufficiently restored to be able to interest himself in the matter. Such, it appears, was the case. A night's sleep, acting in conjunction with a naturally robust constitution, had enabled Sergeant Vowles to rise at his usual hour and partake of a hearty breakfast. Breakfast! I couldn't help murmuring, in spite of my iron self-control. The word had touched an exposed nerve in Bertram. On receiving the communication, Sergeant Vowles hastened to the hall to interview his lordship. Why his lordship? His lordship is a justice of the peace, sir. Of course, yes. And as such has the power to commit the prisoner to incarceration in a more recognized prison. He's waiting in the library now, my lord, till your lordship is at leisure to see him. If the word breakfast was, as it were, the key word that had the power to set Bertram Wooster a-quiver, it appeared that prison was the one that tickled old Stoker up properly. He uttered a hideous cry. But how can he be in prison? What's he got to do with prisons? Why does this fool of a cop think he ought to be in a prison? The charge, I understand, sir, is one of burglary. Burglary? Yes, sir. Old Stoker looked so piteously at me, why me, I don't know, but he did, that I nearly patted him on the head. In fact, I might quite easily have done so, hadn't my hand been stayed by a sudden noise in my rear, like that made by a frightened hen or a rising pheasant. The Dowager Lady Chuffnell had come charging into the room. "Marmaduke!" she cried, and I can give no better indication of her emotion than by saying that as she spoke her eyes rested on my face, and it made no impression on her whatsoever. For all the notice she took of it, I might have been the great white chief. "Marmaduke, I have the most terrible news, Roderick." "All right," said Chuffy, a little petulantly, I thought. "We've had it too. Jeeves is just telling us. But what are we to do?" "I don't know. And it's all my fault, all my fault." "Oh, don't say that, Aunt Myrtle," said Chuffy, rattled, but still purr. "You couldn't have helped it." I could. I shall never forgive myself. If it hadn't been for me, he would never have gone out of the house with that black stuff on his face." I was really sorry for poor old Stoker. One thing after another, I mean to say. His eyes came out of his head like a snail's. "Black stuff?" he gurgled faintly. He'd covered his face with burnt cork to amuse Seabury. Old Stoker tottered to a chair and sank into it. He seemed to be thinking that this was one of those stories you could listen to better sitting down. "You can only remove the horrible stuff with butter.
"And petrol, so the cognoscenti tell me," I couldn't help putting in. "I like to keep these things straight. You support me, Jeeves? Petrol does the trick?" "Yes, sir." "Well, petrol then. Petrol or butter. At any rate, it was to get something that would take the stuff off that he must have broken into this house. And now—" She cheesed it in mid-sentence, deeply moved. Not, however, any more deeply than old Stoker, who seemed to be more or less passing through the furnace. "This is the finish," he said in a sort of pale voice. "This is where I drop $50 million and try to like it. A lot of use any testimony in a lunacy case is going to be from a fellow who gets himself pinched while wandering around the country in blackface. Why, there isn't a judge in America who wouldn't rule out anything he said on the ground that he was crazy himself." Lady Chuffnell quivered. "But he did it to please my son." "Anybody who would do anything to please a young hound like that," said old Stoker, "must have been crazy." He emitted a mirthless L. "Ah, the joke's on me, all right. Yes, the joke's certainly on me. I stake everything on the evidence of this man Glossop. I rely on him to save my $50 million by testifying that old George wasn't loco. And 2 minutes after I've put him on the stand, the other side will come right back at me showing that my expert is a loony himself, loonier than ever old George could have been if he'd tried for 1,000 years. That's funny when you come to think of it. Ironical. Reminds one of that thing about blow, somebody's name led all the rest." Jeeves coughed. He had that informative gleam of his in his eyes. "Abu Ben Adam, sir." "Have I what?" said old Stoker, puzzled. "The poem to which you allude relates to a certain Abu Ben Adam, who, according to the story, awoke one night from a deep dream of peace to find an angel—" "Get out," said old Stoker very quietly. "Sir?" "Get out of this room before I murder you." "Yes, sir." "And take your angels with you." "Very good, sir." The door closed. Old Stoker puffed out his breath in a stricken sort of way. "Angels," he said, "at a time like this?" I felt it only fair to stick up for Jeeves. "He was perfectly right," I said. "I used to know the thing by heart at school. This cove found an angel sitting by his bed, writing in a book, don't you know? And the upshot of the whole affair was—" "Oh, all right, if you don't want to hear." I withdrew to a corner of the room and picked up a photograph album. Wooster doesn't thrust his conversation upon the unwilling. For some time after this, there was a good deal of what you might call mixed chatter, in which, through dudgeon, I took no part. Everybody talked at once, and nobody said anything that you could have described as being in the least constructive, except old Stoker, who proved that I'd been right in thinking that he must at one time have been a pirate of the Spanish or some other main by coming boldly out with a suggestion for a rescue party. "What's the matter?" he wanted to know, "with going and breaking the door down and getting him out and smuggling him away and hiding him somewhere and letting these darn cops run circles round themselves trying to find him?" Chuffy demurred. "We couldn't." "Why not?" "You heard Jeeves say Dobson was on guard?" "Bat him over the head with a shovel." Chuffy didn't seem to like this idea much. "I suppose if you're a JP you have to be careful what you do. Bat policemen over the head with shovels and the county looks askance." "Well, darn it, then bribe him." You can't bribe an English policeman." "You mean that?" "Not a chance." "My God, what a country!" said old Stoker with a sort of whistling groan, and you could see that he would never be able to feel quite the same towards England again. My dudgeon melted. We Woosters are human, and the spectacle of so much anguish in a moderately sized room was too much for me. I crossed to the fireplace and pressed the bell, with the result that just as old Stoker was beginning to say what he thought about English policemen, the door opened, and there was Jeeves. Old Stoker eyed him balefully. "You back?" "Yes, sir." "Well?" "Sir?" "What do you want?" "The bell rang, sir." Chuffy did another spot of hand-waving. No, Jeeves, nobody rang." I stepped forward. "I rang, Chuffy." "What for?" "For Jeeves." "We don't want Jeeves." "Chuffy, old man," I said, and those present were no doubt thrilled by the quiet gravity of my tone. "If there could ever be a time when you wanted Jeeves more than you do now, I
I lost the thread of my remarks and had to start again. "Chuffy," I said, "what I'm driving at is that there's only one man who can get you out of this mess. He stands before you." "I mean Jeeves," I said, to make the thing clearer. "You know as well as I do that on these occasions Jeeves always finds the way." Chuffy was plainly impressed. I could see that memory had begun to stir and that he was recalling some of the man's triumphs. "By Jove, yes, that's right. He does, doesn't he?" "He does indeed." I shot a quelling glance at old Stoker, who'd started to say something about angels, and turned to the man. "Jeeves," I said, "we require your cooperation and advice." "Very good, sir. To begin with, let me give you a brief synopsis. Do I mean synopsis?" "Yes, sir. Synopsis is perfectly correct. A brief synopsis, then, of the position of affairs. I've no doubt that you recall the late Mr. George Stoker. That cable you brought just now was to say that his will, under the terms of which Mr. Stoker here has benefited so considerably, is being contested on the ground that the testator was as goofy as a coot." "Yes, sir." In rebuttal of this, Mr. Stoker had intended to bung Sir Roderick Glossop into the witness box to testify as an expert that old George was grade A in the sanity line, not a gibber in him, if you see what I mean. And in ordinary circs this move could not have failed. It would have brought home the bacon infallibly. "Yes, sir. But, and this is the nub of the thing, Jeeves, Sir Roderick is now in the potting shed, the larger potting shed, with his face covered with burnt cork and a sharp sentence for burglary staring him in the eyeball. You see how this weakens him as a force?" "Yes, sir." In this world, Jeeves, you can do one of two things. You can set yourself up as a final authority on whether your fellow man is sane or not, or you can go blacking your face and getting put in potting sheds. You cannot do both. So, what's to be done, Jeeves?" "I would suggest removing Sir Roderick from the shed, sir." I turned to the meeting. There! Didn't I tell you Jeeves would find the way? One dissentient voice, old Stoker's. He seemed bent on heckling. "Remove him from the shed? Yes," he said, and in an exceedingly nasty voice. "How? With a team of angels?" He started his buffalo imitations again, and I had to shush him pretty firmly. "Can you remove Sir R from the S, Jeeves?" "Yes, sir." "You're convinced of this?" "Yes, sir." "You've already formulated a plan or scheme?" "Yes, sir." "Oh, I take it all back," said old Stoker reverently. "Forget I said it. Get me out of this jam, and you can come and wake me up in the night and talk about angels if you want." "Thank you, sir. By removing Sir Roderick before he's actually brought into the presence of his lordship, sir," proceeded Jeeves, "we shall, I think, obviate all unpleasantness. His identity is not yet known to either Constable Dobson or Sergeant Vowles. The constable had never seen him before their meeting last night, and assumes that he is a member of the troupe of negroid minstrels who performed on Mr. Stoker's yacht. Sergeant Vowles is under the same impression. We have, therefore, only to release Sir Roderick before the matter is gone further into, and all will be well." I followed him. "I follow you, Jeeves," I said. "If you will allow me, sir, I will now sketch out the method which I would advocate for accomplishing this end." "Yes," said old Stoker. "What is this method? Spill it." I held up a hand. A thought had struck me. "Wait, Jeeves," I said. "Just one moment." I fixed old Stoker with a compelling eye. "Before we go any further, there are two things to be settled. Do you give your solemn word to purchase Chuffnell Hall from old Chuffy here at a price to be agreed upon between the two contracting parties?" Yes, let's get on." "And you consent to the union of your daughter Pauline with old Chuffy, and none of that rot about her marrying me?" Sure." "Jeeves," I said, "you may speak." I stepped back and gave him the floor, noting as I did so that his eye was agleam with the light of pure intelligence. His head, as usual, bulged out at the back. "Having given this matter a good deal of consideration, sir, I've come to the conclusion that the chief difficulty that confronts us in our attempt upon our objective lies in the presence before the entrance of the potting shed of Constable Dobson." "Very true, Jeeves. He represents the crux, if I may say so." "Certainly you may say so, Jeeves. Another way of putting it would be the snag. Precisely, sir. Our first move, accordingly, must be to eliminate Constable Dobson. That's what I said, put in old Stoker rather querulously. And you wouldn't listen to me. I squelched him. You wanted to hit him over the head with a spade or something. All wrong. What is needed here is, what's the word, Jeeves? Finesse, sir. Exactly. Carry on, Jeeves. This, in my opinion, may be readily accomplished by sending word to him that the parlour-maid Mary wishes to see him in the raspberry bushes. I was stunned by the man's sagacity, but not so stunned as to be unable to turn to the others and add an explanatory footnote. This Mary, this parlour-maid, I said, is betrothed to the blighter Dobson, and while I've only seen her in the distance, I can testify that she's exactly the sort of girl any red-blooded constable would come leaping into the raspberry bushes to meet. Full of sex appeal, eh, Jeeves? An exceedingly attractive young woman, sir. And I think that we might make matters even more certain by including in the message a word to the effect that she had a cup of coffee and a ham sandwich for him. The constable, I find, has not yet breakfasted. I winced. Skim lightly over this bit, Jeeves. I'm not made of marble. I beg your pardon, sir. I was forgetting. Quite all right, Jeeves. You'll have to square Mary, of course. No, sir. I've been canvassing her views, and I find that she is extremely eager to convey refreshment to the officer. I would suggest giving her a message, ostensibly from the latter, to the effect that he's waiting at the spot indicated. I had to interrupt. A snag, Jeeves, a crux, in fact. If he wanted food, why wouldn't he come straight to the house? He would be apprehensive of being observed by Sergeant Vowles, sir. He's under strict orders from his superior to remain at his post. Then would he leave it? Asked Chuffy. My dear old man, I said, he hasn't yet breakfasted, and this girl will be dripping with coffee and ham sandwiches. Don't hold up the dialogue with foolish questions. Yes, Jeeves? In his absence, sir, it would be a simple task to remove Sir Roderick and lead him to some place of concealment. His lordship's bedroom suggests itself. And Dobson wouldn't have the nerve to confess that he had abandoned the post of duty. That's what you're driving at? Precisely, sir. His lips would be sealed. Old Stoker shoved himself forward again. No good, he said. Wouldn't work. I'm not saying we couldn't get Glossop away, but the cops would see that there'd been funny business. Their man would have gone, and they'd figured out that somebody had got him away. They'd put two and two together and get wise to us having done it. Last night, for example, on my yacht. He stopped, not wishing, I suppose, to disinter the dead past, but I saw what he meant. When I'd got away from the yacht, it hadn't taken him long to see that Jeeves must have been at the bottom of it. It's a point, Jeeves, I was bound to say. The constabulary might not be able to do anything definite, but they would talk about it, and before we knew where we were, the story would be out that Sir Roderick had been roaming around with his face blacked up. The local paper would get hold of it, one of those gossip writers you find at the drones, always waiting with their ears flapping for good stuff about the eminent, would hear of it, and then we should be just as badly off as if the old boy went and picked oakum at Dartmoor or somewhere for years. No, sir. The officers would find a prisoner in the shed. I would advocate substituting you for Sir Roderick. I stared at the man. Me? It is vital, if I may be allowed to point out, sir, that a black-faced prisoner be found in the shed when the moment arrives for the accused to be conducted before his lordship. But I don't look like old Glossop. We're built on different lines. Me, slender and willowy. Him, well, I don't wish to say anything derogatory concerning one who's bound to the aunt of an old friend by ties warmer than those of... Well, what I'm driving at is that you couldn't by any stretch of the imag call him slender and willowy. You are forgetting, sir, that only Constable Dobson has actually seen the prisoner, and his lips, as I say, will be sealed. It was true. I'd forgotten that. Yes, but Jeeves, dash it, anxious as I am to bring aid and comfort to this stricken home, I'm not so bally keen on going 5 years in the jug for burglary. There's no danger of that, sir. The building into which Sir Roderick was breaking at the moment of his arrest was your own garage. But, Jeeves, reflect, consider, review the position. Am I supposed to have allowed myself to be pinched for breaking into my own garage and shut up in a shed all night without saying a word? It isn't... What is it? It isn't plausible. It's only necessary to induce Sergeant Vowles to believe it, sir. What the constable may think is immaterial, owing to the fact that his lips are sealed." "But Vowles wouldn't believe it for a minute." "Oh, yes, sir. I fancy that he's under the impression that it is a frequent practice of yours to sleep in sheds." Chuffy uttered a glad cry. "Of course! He'll just take it for granted that you've been mopping it up again." I was frigid. "Oh," I said, "and you couldn't have described my voice as anything but caustic. So I'm to go down in the history of Chuffnell Regis as one of our leading dipsomaniacs." "He may just think him potty," suggested Pauline. "That's right," said Chuffy. He turned to me pleadingly. "Bertie," he said, "you aren't going to tell me at this time of day that you have any objection to being considered—" "Mentally negligible?" said Pauline. "Exactly," said Chuffy. "Of course you'll do it. What? Bertie Wooster? Sacrifice himself to a little temporary inconvenience to save his friends? Why, he jumps at that sort of job." "Springs at it," said Pauline. "Leaps at it," said Chuffy. "I've always thought he was a fine young fellow," said old Stoker. "I remember thinking so the first time I met him." "So did I," said Lady Chuffnell. "So different from so many of these modern young men. I liked his face. I've always liked his face." My head was swimming a bit. It isn't often I get as good a press as this, and the old salve was beginning to unman me. I tried feebly to stem the tide. "Yes, but listen. I was at school with Bertie Wooster," said Chuffy. "I like to think of it. At private school, and also at Eton, and after that at Oxford, he was loved by everybody." "Because of his wonderful, unselfish nature?" asked Pauline. "You've absolutely hit it, because of his wonderful, unselfish nature, because when it was a question of helping a pal, he would go through fire and water to do so. I wish I had a quid for every time I've seen him take the blame for somebody else's dirty work on his own broad shoulders." "How splendid!" said Pauline. "Just what I'd have expected of him," said old Stoker. "Just," said Lady Chuffnell. "The child is the father of the man." You'd see him face a furious headmaster with a sort of dauntless look in those big blue eyes of his. I held up a hand. "Enough, Chuffy," I said. "Sufficient. I will go through this ghastly ordeal, but one word. When I come out, do I get breakfast?" "You get the best breakfast Chuffnell Hall can provide." I eyed him searchingly. "Kippers?" "Schools of kippers. Toast? Mounds of toast. And coffee? Pots." I inclined the head. "Well, mind I do," I said. "Come, Jeeves. I'm ready to accompany you." "Very good, sir. If I might be permitted to make an observation." "Yes, Jeeves?" "It is a far, far better thing that you do than you have ever done, sir." "Thank you, Jeeves." As I said before, there's nobody who puts these things more neatly than he does. Chapter 22. Jeeves applies for a situation. The sunlight poured into the small morning room of Chuffnell Hall. It played upon me, sitting at a convenient table, on Jeeves, hovering in the background, on the skeletons of 4 kippered herrings, on a coffee pot, and on an empty toast rack. I poured myself out the final drops of coffee and sipped thoughtfully. Recent events had set their seal upon me, and it was a graver, more mature Bertram Wooster who now eyed the toast rack, and finding nothing there, transferred his gaze to the man in attendance. "Who's the cook at the Hall now, Jeeves?" "A woman of the name of Perkins, sir." "She dishes up a nifty breakfast. Convey my compliments to her." "Very good, sir." I touched the cup to my lips. "All this is rather like the gentle sunshine after the storm, Jeeves." "Extremely like it, sir." "It was quite a storm, what?" "Very trying at times, sir." "Trying is the mot juste, Jeeves. I was thinking of my own trial at that very moment. I flatter myself that I'm a strong man, Jeeves. I'm not easily moved by life's untoward happenings, but I'm bound to confess that it was an unpleasant experience coming up before Chuffy. I was nervous and embarrassed. A good deal of the awful majesty of the law about old Chuffy. I didn't know he wore horn-rimmed spectacles." When acting as Justice of the Peace, invariably I understand, sir. I gather that his lordship finds that they lend him confidence in his magisterial duties. Well, I think someone ought to have warned me. I got a nasty shock. They change his whole expression, make him look just like my Aunt Agatha. It was only by reminding myself that he and I once stood in the same dock together at Bow Street, charged with raising Cain on boat race night, that I was enabled to maintain my sang-froid. However, the unpleasantness was short-lived. I must admit he rushed things through nice and quickly. He soon settled Dobson's hash, what? Yes, sir. A rather severe reprimand, I thought. Well phrased, sir. And Bertram dismissed without a stain on his character? Yes, sir. But with Police Sergeant Vowles firmly convinced that he's either an inveterate souse or a congenital loony. Possibly both. However, I proceeded, turning from the dark side, it's no use worrying about that. Very true, sir. The main point is that once again you've shown that there is no crisis which you are unable to handle. A very smooth effort, Jeeves, exceedingly smooth. I could have effected nothing without your cooperation, sir. Tush, Jeeves, I was a mere pawn in the game. Oh, no, sir. Yes, Jeeves, I know my place. But there's just one thing. Don't think for a moment that I want to detract from the merit of your performance, but you did have a bit of luck, what? Sir? Well, that cable happening to come along in what you might call the very nick of time, a fortunate coincidence. No, sir. I had anticipated its arrival. What? In the cable which I dispatched to my friend Benstead in New York the day before yesterday, I urged him to lose no time in retransmitting the message which formed the body of my communication. You don't mean to say, immediately after the rift had occurred between Mr. Stoker and Sir Roderick Glossop, involving as it did the former's decision not to purchase Chuffnell Hall, and the consequent unpleasantness to his lordship and Miss Stoker, the dispatching of the cable to Benstead suggested itself to me as a possible solution. I surmised that the news that the late Mr. Stoker's will was being contested would lead to a reconciliation between Mr. Stoker and Sir Roderick. And there's nobody contesting the will, really? No, sir. But what about when old Stoker finds out? I feel convinced that his natural relief will overcome any possible resentment at the artifice, and he has already signed the necessary documents relating to the sale of Chuffnell Hall. So that even if he's as sick as mud, he can't do a thing. Exactly, sir. I fell into a moody silence. Apart from astounding me, this revelation had had the effect of engendering a poignant anguish. I mean to say, the thought that I'd let this man get away from me, that he was now in Chuffy's employment, and that there was a fat chance of Chuffy ever being chump enough to put him into circulation again, well, dash it, you can't say it wasn't enough to shove the iron into the soul. It was with something of the spirit of the old aristocrat mounting the tumbril that I forced myself to wear the mask. Cigarette, Jeeves? He produced the box, and I puffed in silence. Might I ask, sir, what you intend to do now? I came out of the reverie. Eh? And now that your cottage is burned down, sir, is it your purpose to take another in this neighbourhood? I shook the head. No, Jeeves, I shall return to the Metrop. To your former apartment, sir? Yes, but I anticipated the question. I know what you're going to say, Jeeves. You're thinking of Mr. Mangelhofer, of the Honourable Mrs. Tinkler-Moker, and Lieutenant Colonel J.J. Bustard. But circumstances have altered since I was compelled to take the firm stand I did in regard to their attitude towards the old Banjolele. From now on there will be no friction. My Banjolele perished in the flames last night, Jeeves. I shall not buy another. No, sir. No, Jeeves. The zest has gone. I shouldn't be able to twang a string without thinking of Brinkley, and the one thing I don't wish to do till further notice is think of that man of wrath. You're not intending to retain him in your employment, then, sir? Retain him in my employment? After what has occurred? After finishing first by the shortest of heads in the race with him and his carving knife? I do not so intend, Jeeves. Stalin, yes. Al Capone, certainly, but not Brinkley. He coughed. Then,
As there is a vacancy in your establishment, sir, I wonder if you would consider it a liberty if I were to offer my services." I upset the coffee pot. "You said what, Jeeves?" "I ventured to express the hope, sir, that you might be agreeable to considering my application for the post. I should endeavour to give satisfaction, as I trust I have done in the past. But I wouldn't wish in any case to continue in the employment of his lordship, sir, now that he is about to be married. I yield to no one in my admiration for the many qualities of Miss Stoker, but it has never been my policy to serve in the household of a married gentleman." "Why not?" "It's merely a personal feeling, sir." "I see what you mean. The psychology of the individual?" "Precisely, sir." "And you really want to come back with me?" "I should esteem it a great privilege, sir, if you'd allow me to do so, sir, unless you are thinking of making other plans." It isn't easy to find words in these supreme moments, if you know what I mean. What I mean is, you get a moment like this, supreme, as you might say, with the clouds all cleared away and the good old sun buzzing along on all 6 cylinders, and you feel, well, I mean, dash it. "Thank you, Jeeves," I said. "Not at all, sir." The end. You've been listening to Thank You, Jeeves by P.G. Wodehouse, narrated by Alexander Spencer.